Hello.
Hello again.
We'll bring you guys. There we go. Hey,
Oh, hey, Mark.
there we go. Hey, Mark. I don't know about you guys, but that timer music gets me all anxious.
It is kind of dramatic, isn't
Yeah.
it?
You feel like this.
Yeah. Building up.
Darth Vader's coming, right?
It's not in Dolby Atmos, but I guess
No.
that's okay for live chat. So
Yeah.
Oh, I got to thank you too. I went out to Burn Power's channel and watched Ellis Potter.
Yes.
And that was and what a blast from the past. Who knew L'Abri? I was reading Francis Schaeffer in my late teens and early 20s before I was drifting away. But I remember the big deal was it was kind of the beginning of when evangelicals started getting more and more politically involved, which there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I started moving further and further away from that because pretty soon that's all I heard was, the politics kind of overtook everything else, not from Francis Schaeffer, but from people that read his work and then.
Yeah, interesting. I guess there's a lot that's interesting. I've learned a fair bit about Francis Schaeffer and L'Abri from Burn. He talked about it a lot. And there's a couple of people that are around this community of the YouTube circle of YouTube channels that we're part of that are close to L'Abri. Burn Power went to L'Abri and he's done some lectures there. And
Ellis Potter was there for a while. So
yeah.
And Frankie Schaeffer, who is now Orthodox.
Yeah.
Well, at least he still attends liturgy and he receives the Lord's Supper, but a lot of I think he's still got issues he's working on.
I follow him on Twitter, and his Twitter behavior is like just totally crazy. Like he just seems like a crazy person to me on Twitter, but Twitter does that to people. So,
well, I went out to the website too and looked at some of the blog stuff, and it's like, and look, okay, he's my brother, Lord, but I'm out. It's just, I'm a still relatively new. It seems like I've been around forever, doesn't it, Rick? But
yeah,
I'm only about 2. I'll be 3 years converted in August, but it's like I don't need this. No.
Yeah. Is he Orthodox? Because I heard years ago that he became Orthodox. I was surprised. I looked him up. I found some things, and then there's a book that he wrote that I read. It was pretty good, except it's kind of, this was several years ago. I don't remember the name of the book or something. Dancing something or other, and then later on, I don't follow him or anything like that. I don't do that kind of thing. But then I heard something somewhere that he was kind of going off track or whatever, and then I found another thing. This is again years ago, and he seemed to have renounced everything. So I don't know.
Oh. But I don't know anything specifically. All I know is his behavior, public behavior on social media is kind of off the rails. But I still follow him. I follow a lot of people that are like that.
Wow.
and I had to, and I have I can't. A friend, my brother played in a band with them with Bourgeois Tag, and they made their first album and stuff. And so Brent Bourgeois, I think, follows Frankie as well, and they're the same type of Christian as far as, which is basically Christianity. It seems like to me, and I can't say, I don't want to impute motives, but it seems like that Christianity is used basically because their true belief system is their political beliefs. And so Christianity is all well and good as long as you are the, right type of, political beast.
Yeah, it would seem that way based on the things he says. He's like Trump derangement syndrome to the max,
Yes.
Yeah.
Just,
rarely does he say anything religious that I see, and when he does, it's sort of to denigrate, people he doesn't like within the church or something like that.
Anybody that believes it, basically.
Yeah.
It seems like we're problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so, should we get going now? Or
Yeah, let's do it. Rick has prepared some.
Is it just the three of us so far, or
So there's 3 people also watching in addition. So the 3 of us.
They can see my thing that I sent you.
Yeah, I can put it up on the screen here.
Mark also, but so anyway, so like I said at the beginning, because Psalm 22 verse 16 came up the last 2 sessions. This is that verse about they've pierced my hands to my feet, and now Jacob doesn't agree with this and has some things to say about it. I was debating within myself for the past week or so, should I wait until we get to that verse or just do something ahead of time? So I thought I'll do something ahead of time.
I think that's a good idea. And if I may, I'll just recap what Jacob said about this.
Okay.
So Jacob is, he's a Jew, and he is a full-on Masoretic Hebrew text supremacist. So what the Hebrew says for him, that's the translation that he uses. And oops, did I turn my camera off?
Yeah, you're on.
And he over and against the Greek. So the Greek, from his perspective, it's a translation of the Hebrew, and it is of a lesser status from his perspective. And in verse 22, Psalm 22:16, in that verse, it says something like lions, they surrounded my hands and feet, or something like that.
Yeah.
And but in the Greek text, it says they have pierced my hands and feet. And Christians have, some Christians have been very adamant to insist that the correct translation is, they have pierced my hands and feet. And there's some obvious motivations that Christians might have to insist on that. And Jacob, from his perspective, he thinks that that's silly to really insist that the Greek translation is the true meaning of the verse. And so that was where Jacob was coming from. And so Richard prepared some stuff to address that. Is that fair, Rick?
Yeah, that sounds fair. I'm just checking up bibliography. I think I put it down. Yeah, I did. Okay. From another thing. So this thing I put together, been working on it this past fortnight or so, on or off. And I mentioned, I think before, that I've heard when I was younger in like a Bible college or other places, the oft-made claims, I put it here, that whenever the Greek translation, say the Septuagint, disagrees with the Hebrew, the Greek is wrong, the Hebrew's right. The Greek's been mistranslated or something, which is wrong. But this whole attitude, I think, is really grossly oversimplified. And I put down in my little handout here, there's several reasons why I think this is a misguided, oversimplified reaction. The first one, and this is not necessarily in any order, but in terms of the more likely to less likely, but the Greek translation in general may be based on a form of the Hebrew text that we no longer have, or a previous edition or a recension or something. And I got this idea from this author, this book here. I put this in my hand, Textual Criticism by what's his name? Ellis Broadswan. It's a really good little book. I've read through the thing, most of it. So if you don't know any Greek or Hebrew, it's kind of hard to deal with it, but it's a very good book in terms of dealing with Old Testament textual criticism, which I'm not terribly familiar with. And he points out how a lot of some of the current thinking among biblical scholars is that the Greek Septuagint might in fact reflect a different textual tradition altogether from what we have today or something. Another possibility is there may have been some early old Hebrew variant readings and manuscripts that we just don't know anything about, and maybe some of these translation issues came through an older older textual problem that doesn't exist for us anymore. The next point I have down here is that translators might have known something about the Hebrew text, say maybe an idiomatic or unusual meaning or some allusion to something that we know nothing about. So we're assuming that what we know is exactly what they knew, and I don't think that's right. That gets into my favorite term from C.S. Lewis, chronological snobbery. You know, the third point I put down here is that the translator may have been using some unusual translation technique, and we know this is the case in some cases, trying to be slavishly literal or too freewheeling, trying to perceive or maintain perceived Hebrew roots or affixes or something and duplicate them in Greek. The next point is the translator may have been interpreting the Hebrew text rather than just translating it. The idea is he might have been thinking, well, the Hebrew word X, whatever, actually means Y, so I'll use a Greek word for Y instead of the Greek word for X. And then kind of interpreting, basically, instead of really translating.
Can you give an example of the last two that you mentioned? I didn't quite follow the previous one.
You mean about knowing something about the Hebrew text?
No, unusual translation technique, trying to be...
So in addition to the Septuagint, there's Symmachus, Theodotion, Aquila. These are all older translations, and one of them, I forget which one, I think is in Ecclesiasticus or the Song of Solomon or something. Apparently, there's this Hebrew word, it's actually like a prefix, et, that marks the direct object of a verb. So in biblical Hebrew, if you want to say, I saw John, we say I, subject, saw, and then et John, to show that John is the object or something. And apparently what I read somewhere is that one of these guys was translating that with a certain preposition in Greek, which kind of makes no sense, but he did it just because he's trying to be super literal and super consistent. And whenever this word occurred, it has to be that word there, or whenever this root occurs, it has to be this Greek word there. And it just renders the thing kind of a mess in terms of trying to read it just as a Greek text, because it just doesn't work right. So we know this kind of thing happened occasionally. And it's not just a matter of Hebrew translations, but there's all sorts of other translations. You know, English, I mean, not English, but Greek and Coptic, Greek and Latin, other things that were sometimes kind of dicey once in a while based on whoever was doing the translations or something. And so in terms of the biblical text, maybe a translator misunderstood or misread the Hebrew text somehow. My last point, maybe the translator was just baffled by the Hebrew text and just didn't know what it meant at all, had no clue, and just wrote something that sounded good to him. A little note here I put in is that if there's a committee of translators, and remember with the letter of ἀποστῆς, this legend about the translations of the Torah. Initially, there's like a committee, maybe 70. That's where the word 70 comes from. Maybe 70 translators working together as groups to translate the thing. So if there's a committee translating or doing any kind of work, this would basically take care of the last 4 points about freewheeling translations or interpretations or misreading something or not understanding something. Because if one guy said, well, here's my translation of this verse, somebody else would say, that's not right. You don't get it. You missed something here. So I think the last 4 points that I have here are more relevant to individuals translating, because there's no safety net or so in terms of somebody else to say, no, you screwed up here.
Do we know anything about the circumstances of the translation of the Psalms?
No, not that I know of. As far as I know, we know very little about the translation of any of the stuff. The only legend we have is from ἀποστῆς that about the 70 or so, 72 or something, and that was embellished and carried on by others like Josephus and Philo later on. So I know some modern scholars deny the historicity of that legend altogether, but there's still a problem of where the number 70 comes from, why 70. So whether it was actually a 70-man team, it doesn't matter to me much, but I think probably the Torah, as the legend has, was done by a committee, a team of scholars working on together, and then kind of agreeing on the best way to do things. I know the book of Sirach was written in Hebrew by Sirach's grandfather, I think it was, and we see this in the preface to the book of Sirach. He says that he, about 50 years later, translated it into Greek. So he's one guy doing the translation by himself, but he acknowledges this, and he gives a certain year of one of the Egyptian kings. I think Ephraites or so was the king of Egypt at the time. This is around the year 130 or so BC. So here's a later document that has a real date to it, more or less. And we know one guy was doing it because he said, my grandfather wrote this thing. It apparently was a collection of texts and notes, and he kind of put them together, translated it all into Greek, and then published it as the book of Sirach that we have now.
Were there any Greek texts in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yes. Actually, there were several. Even some segments of the book of Sirach, apparently, Hebrew and Greek or so.
I think somebody mentioned last time that that this particular verse 22:16 has the rendition "pierced my hands and feet" from a text in Dead Sea Scrolls. Does that seem right to you?
I don't know. I'd have to go look it up again. I've got a copy of what's his name, Vermes, I think, an English translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The copy I have is like the 4th edition, and I forget the year. It's in my bookshelf in the other room. I read that years ago, just out of curiosity. It's very interesting. And then more recently, I looked up. I was curious. Well, how much of the Old Testament that we have is actually in the Dead Sea Scrolls? And that's not a lot of it. I know the Isaiah scroll is the most complete text, as far as I know, biblical text. There's a lot of sections from other prophets. The Torah is pretty well represented, but not the entire thing. And there's other bits and pieces here and there, some of the Psalms. But there's whole books that they don't exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls yet. They haven't found anything.
Is that Tanakh in there?
Well, no, not the whole thing. I think the impression people sometimes get is, because they talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and like to throw around information about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I think the impression I've sort of gotten, and I'm sure this is other people have gotten this idea, is that, well, here's the Hebrew Old Testament, and the whole thing can be found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's not true. It's very fragmentary. And there's a list, I think, on Wikipedia that I found, and it has a list of all the current texts and what they are in terms of the biblical text and everything. And there's a bunch of Psalms there, and I don't remember if I saw Psalm 22 listed. I don't remember. I can go back and double check. And then there's a whole bunch of other texts that are there but haven't been published yet. So I don't know. It's just kind of a huge mess. I don't follow it too much at all. But the claim that, oh, this verse reads this way or that way. I remember the problem with Isaiah 7:14 about whether it says Alma or Betula, Parthenos in Greek, the virgin shall give birth or something. I've seen both things. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls support one reading, no, there's the other reading. And I tried to go online and find a copy of that section. I think I found it, but it's really hard to read because there's lots of lacuna, and even the bottom of the text is sometimes frayed and everything. So I was going along with my Hebrew text trying to find where that word was, and I found something, but it's kind of blotched and messy. It's really hard to see exactly what the word is. But I thought, well, so people make these claims. I don't take it too seriously because I don't have enough background to verify a lot of these things. And some of these things are just, I think people are just maybe grasping at straws, trying to use the Dead Sea Scrolls to prove this point or that point, and it may or may not be accurate. I just don't know.
Interesting.
But anyway, so these points here that I put down are like general possible reasons. But then when it comes to a particular reading, and I'm thinking of this particular verse, Psalm 22, verse 16, a particular reading in a particular passage, it's often very difficult to determine the exact reasons for the difference in translation. The worst thing that one can do is impugn the motives of the translators, especially those unknown Jewish translators who died over 2,000 years ago. In many, if not most particular cases, the best answer to the question, why is the Greek so different from the Hebrew here, is to say simply, we don't know, and leave it at that. And I have this, my comment here is speculation is not a valid reason. I see a lot of this in biblical scholars and things when I've read them, books and articles, and I see lots of speculation on the one hand, and because of my background, I think, well, where's the proof? Where's some evidence? Hardcore evidence about this or that or the other, and often it's not really there. The evidence, there's no evidence, it's just a speculation or an idea or something. And the idea might sound good, but then where's the real hardcore empirical evidence to support this speculation? This is one of my issues with biblical scholarship. Again, like I said last time, I'm educated, but not in their way. And I don't think the way they think. So for me, speculation is not a valid reason. I want to see some actual, some proof, not just a good reason. Another thing that comes up about this particular verse is the issue of textual criticism. I'm much more familiar with Greek New Testament textual criticism and the manuscripts and everything, not so much with the Hebrew. And I know if I have a problem or a question about English or about the Greek text in the New Testament, even the Old Testament, I can go through and get some answers for myself. I'm not so keen on doing that with the Hebrew text because my knowledge of Hebrew is really basic. And I know I have the German, Stuttgart's Old Testament, Hebrew Old Testament. There's all these textual notes in the bottom, and it's like a code. I haven't figured out the code. I don't really care that much. So I know these things are there. I'm not sure what it says. I'm not sure how to deal with it or even how to read it or understand it. So I basically ignore it the few times I go through it. So generally, if I'm going through an English text in the Old Testament and there's a problem or something and I'm wonder about it, I generally go to some English translations, like the King James or New King James, the Revised Standard or so. And my next part here on page 2 is that even using the notes in some of the margins of these old translations can be a problem. And I've noticed, especially in the New Testament, often these textual notes are biased. And I think this is a problem that most English readers don't even notice. And so a fair, neutral, unbiased comment about some variant reading would be something like, some other manuscripts read EFG, for example. If the text is printing ABC, there's another reading EFG. Well, some manuscripts read EFG. Okay, that's fine. But whether that word, the reading is a single word or a phrase or a verse or something, even an entire passage. But I've got 3 examples of the most prevalent biased comments that I've seen in different translations of the Bible over the years. And so one of them is the best manuscripts read EFG. And I see that and I always think, well, what exactly are the best manuscripts and why? And not even biblical scholars themselves can honestly answer this question because there's so much disagreement among them about which manuscripts are good or better or best. And they even disagree about their own reasons for such judgments. And I remember when I was studying textual criticism, I had this class. We had like 4 or 5 required books, one of which was written by the professor. It was his own theory. It was a manuscript because he couldn't get it published because people didn't like his theory. And on top of these books, we had to read an additional 1,000 pages of other material in terms of New Testament textual criticism. And the professor just encouraged us very strongly, don't read one author, don't read one theory, read a variety of things to get a feel of who's saying what, because there's so many different ideas and theories. And this is like 30, 40 years ago, more like 40 years ago when I was in college. It was a really good class. And I remember reading through these things and even seeing one scholar would say that they favor Vaticanus, for example, because for these reasons. And someone else say, well, no, Vaticanus is good for these other reasons. Somebody else would say, no, Vaticanus is no good. We need to use Sinaiticus or something. And so even from my past reading, I have no idea what has been going on for the past few decades because I don't keep up with this too much. But I know that scholars, at least they used to, have lots of disagreements about all sorts of things. And so textual criticism, at least in the sense of New Testament, is not a uniform monolithic thing. It's a lot of stuff going on. And there's some extremists in every camp. I generally tend to stay away from them, but even among the people that are kind of on the same page, they can't agree on a lot of things.
So, Rick, this approach sounds very time-consuming. If one is trying to just read the Bible for their spiritual benefit,
yeah, it is. I know.
It doesn't seem very practical, does it?
Well, I know, but this is because I've done this anyway, just in terms of my knowledge with Greek and textual criticism and everything. And so even when I'm just reading, sometimes even the Old Testament, whatever it is, it'll be a note about this verse here, and I look in the note and something about the Septuagint this or the Hebrew that or whatever. And so I look at it. I don't really study it too much, but if someone wanted to, I know some people really get into this kind of thing. And even if they want to just read the scriptures for their spiritual development, sometimes it's kind of, they can get sidetracked with some of these notes.
Yeah.
The reason I put this down here is because you can get sidetracked by getting sidetracked. And some people they might see these notes here, and they're really misleading, I think. They're biased. My second one here is some manuscripts omit the reading. The next one is some manuscripts add the reading. And every time I see these, I think, well, how do they know that this is really an addition or a deletion? This is an editorial comment or something. It's not a fact from the manuscripts. They really can't tell. If there's an omission, was it an accidental omission or was it deliberate? And if it's an addition, again, is it accidental or deliberate? And if you think about additions, if you're, I don't know about you, but when I was in college, we had no computers, no cell phones, and I remember writing papers, and I would get materials, books, articles, whatever. I get things from the library. Sometimes I couldn't check it out. And I spent lots of time copying things, copying down pages or paragraphs so I could put them in my paper for the class. And I know from my own experience of just copying stuff that it's easy to accidentally omit things. It's easy to repeat a word or a line or something. So I've done it myself. I get home and think, oh, something's wrong here. I need to go back to the library and check this because I copied this the wrong way or something. And so you could accidentally repeat a word, maybe a short phrase or something, but generally you can't accidentally add a verse to a passage or something. So most of the time, the omissions, the additions are going to be deliberate. Omissions could be accidental, they could be deliberate, it depends again. So just this claim in some of the Bible manual notes in the margins, this is an addition, this is a deletion. I always think, why? How do they know this? They don't really know this. And I say this based on my own knowledge of textual criticism and my knowledge of the manuscripts and things. For textual criticism, there's two axioms that are really, really popular. One of them says prefer the shorter reading, and the other says prefer the more difficult reading. And again, I've read some scholars and their reasons for choosing this reading over that reading, and they often say, well, this, that, and the other, it's a shorter reading, so it must be original, or it's the most difficult or something. And the problem I have with both of these axioms is that accidental omission will naturally produce shorter and more difficult texts. So you can't just go on the fact that this is an omission or something, because it just doesn't work. There's so many other variables going on. So these are like some general ideas about the state of the text. And regarding Psalm 22, verse 16 in particular, towards the bottom of page 2 and the next page, put together, just kind of summarize here some notes from a few English translations. So this is what I would do looking at something. So just in chronological order, for example, the King James 1611 has no notes whatsoever. They just print pierced. The Revised Standard 1946 has a note. Greek, Syriac, Jerome reading pierced, and then Hebrew like a lion. Then there's the New American Standard 1960 says another reading is like a lion. And I thought that's not really helpful. It's just giving a basic fact or something. And then the New International 73 says Dead Sea Scrolls and some manuscripts of the Masoretic text and Septuagint and Syriac will read pierced. Most manuscripts of the Masoretic text read me like a lion. Then there's the New King James 1982. So pierced. So with some Hebrew manuscripts, Septuagint, Syriac, Vulgate, and then Masoretic text like a lion. And then we get the New Revised Standard, which as a translation I don't like at all. 1989, they simply say the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So that's like a big cop-out. But then they change the translation, and that one reads, my hands and feet have shriveled. And as far as I know, shriveled has no basis in either language or something. Then there's the updated version of the New Revised Standard 2021. They say the same thing, meaning of Hebrew is uncertain, but then they change the translation again to they bound my hands and feet. Okay, so this is, I don't usually go through this many. I'll glance at a couple of these things if I'm really interested. Often I'm not. But taking these notes together, all we know, like an English speaker who doesn't know anything about Hebrew or Greek, all they would know is that there are two readings here, like a lion, supported by some Hebrew manuscripts, and then pierced, supported by some Hebrew manuscripts, and other versions like the Greek, the Syriac, and the Latin. Okay, so that's like the fact, but then, excuse me, spam call again on my phone here. So given these two readings as such, then there's really no way to determine which of these readings is original. And I put original in quotes because often a lot of scholars, textual critics, their holy grail is uncovering the original text, which I think is kind of a pipe dream in a lot of ways. So given the texts and the manuscripts, they really can't tell which one is original. This determination or decision will be based on one's theology or textual theory or ideology or such. So generally, Jewish believers, of course, would naturally take the reading like a lion. Christian believers would naturally take the second reading pierced. Other scholars, like the non-believing ones, would take whatever they choose based on whatever they want or something. Okay. And I was thinking of just what we're doing in this Philotimo forum anyway. My inclination is just to take the Septuagint text as we have it, and I have Rolf's text. That's the only one I have. And I'm not really interested in comparing Greek and Hebrew readings. I don't want to pit the Hebrew versus the Greek. Rather, like St. John Chrysostom that I mentioned in my first handout, I would take them as complementary rather than contradictory or so. And it's this kind of, I know Jacob would, of course, disagree, but that's fine. I know you mentioned he's like a Hebrew, what does he call it, Hebrew supremacist or something?
Yeah.
And so that's fine on the one hand. I know there are others who would, I guess you could call them Greek supremacists, who think, well, if there's a difference between Hebrew and Greek, the Greek is right and the Hebrew's wrong. I don't accept that either. So for me, the issue is we have this text, Septuagint. Well, where exactly did it come from? And I think this is why Brotsman's book here, this thing I showed earlier, this is really important and intriguing because it raises the issue of these differences in the Septuagint text might, in fact, be based on a different textual tradition altogether, which means then, of course, we're back to the original question, which one's original? Is it the Masoretic or whatever that precursor was, or was it the Septuagint, whatever that precursor was, or something else? And we just can't answer that question really at this point. There's not enough information. There's not enough evidence, really. There's speculation, but I'm not interested in speculation personally. So that's my little thought here regarding the readings and everything. And so,
are you interested in what we're doing in bringing up the English translation of the Hebrew to see what it says as we go through?
Excuse me. Somebody could do that, but because my knowledge of Hebrew is so sketchy, I'm not inclined to do that because I can't explain it. I can figure out some things. I can read a little bit of it, but sorry. In terms of analyzing the Hebrew, I can't do that.
Right.
If you wanted me to, it would give me a couple of weeks to work on a word.
Yeah.
So Jacob is better at that, but then he's coming from a different perspective, which is fine on the one hand. So I know he's got his forum and dealing with Hebrew and everything, and people are interested in that. And you want to do something with Greek, so I thought, well, if we're going to do something with Greek, then like the Septuagint or so, that's fine. And I just would rather take the text and go through it. And even if we're doing like the New Testament, I would use the New Testament text that I have and then just go through it. I really don't want to get involved in all the New Testament textual issues that would come up, unless it's a major thing like the ending of Mark or something. And because there's more important things to deal with than all these textual things. And some people are really interested in textual stuff. And I used to be very interested myself. And after a while, I got so good at explaining and rationalizing every possible reading that I could find that I realized this is very, very subjective. And it's just, I sort of gave up on the thing. So I got this sort of disillusioned with the whole prospect. It's not really a science. That I could say this is a science, but it's not really a science.
So your interest in looking at the Greek is more from a linguistic perspective than a textual criticism perspective.
Yeah.
You're interested in what is the Greek saying?
Right. So like, here's this text, and we just go through the text, and what does it say?
Yeah.
You think about it, a lot of people, just believers, English believers, they're reading the Old Testament, the New Testament, and there may be I know there's some passages in the Old Testament here and there, and and I've seen this little note occasionally Hebrew is uncertain, so they're taking the reading based on the Syriac or the Greek or something else. And I've seen this every now and then, and I wonder, okay, that's fine. I can't verify that because I don't know enough about Hebrew, but just the fact that they're choosing the Septuagint reading over the Hebrew because they don't understand what the Hebrew means in terms of these are the Christian scholars, I guess. But most people reading the Old Testament, if they notice that, they don't care. As far as I know, maybe most people don't even notice these. I don't know, if when you read the Old Testament, do you ever look at the notes in the margins or so? Or
Depends on how much time I have.
yeah, so.
And I'm no, like you know, yeah, I can't help myself. If I see the little letter or number, my eye drifts down to the bottom margin. So that's why I usually get a reader's edition, so that there are no notes, there are no verse numbers, there are no chapter numbers, so that I just have to read it. So.
And Rick, how often does like your knowledge of like classical Greek, or how often does that influence your reading of the Greek?
Mostly just vocabulary, because words are huge in terms of the meanings of words or so. And I remember I was, well, my throat's getting dry here, but there's this biblical scholar I'd met years ago, and I had this email exchange with him that kind of went south. This is several years ago, and so I said, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. It just sort of became this tit for tat argument in a way. And at one point he's harping on Greek all the time, and this Greek word here and this Greek word there. And I don't remember the detail, but he quoted some verse and invoked some Greek word or something. I looked it up and I thought, this is really, really ambiguous in terms of even the translation, because you could take it in 2 or 3 different ways. They all work, they all make sense. And one translation would take it one way, another translation would take it another way. And I simply tried to point out that this verse he's trying to hinge his argument on is in fact ambiguous, and he refused to accept it. He just said, no, it's not. I said, what do you mean it's not? It's it's obvious. It's right here. It's clear as day. It's ambiguous. He couldn't see it. And so maybe I know that because the words are I know more meanings. I know have a greater range of the meanings or something. And in English, we borrow so many words from Greek and Latin, and even a word like theory, for example. The English word theory comes from the Greek word theoria. Well, theory in English is, I'm going to do it this way. I have to look at myself. This is a certain, like a tiny little meaning in terms of science. But the Greek word theoria is this huge idea. It has all sorts of meanings and everything. So we borrow this Greek word and restrict the meaning to a certain thing in English, and we say this is what it means. But if you look at it in Greek, you can't take the Greek word theoria and translate it as theory most of the time, because it doesn't mean that. And this is normal, and not just with Greek, but Latin and French and German, and all sorts of words that we've borrowed into English. And I tried to point this out to this guy. He couldn't understand that either. He just rejected the whole concept. He said, no, this word means this. I said, no, it doesn't. You don't understand. So I think this is, the classical, it's just, these words are really big, and they have, in a way, it's really, really more significant in a sense. Logos, okay, John 1, Jesus is the Logos. Right, the word. Most Christians, we just think of logos means word. Well, that word logos is one of these huge, heavily packed words in Greek philosophy. It means reason. For the Stoics, it was the prime motivation of their life. They lived by logos, which is reason and everything. And it was just really, it's just this huge word. And so I can imagine, the first readers in the first century reading John's Gospel, especially if they had an education or philosophically minded Greeks or something, they would see in the beginning was the logos, and they're thinking Stoic philosophy or something like that. And that would be much more potent for them than it would be for us, thinking logos means word, because logos doesn't mean just word, it means a lot more. And so we take a good Greek word that has this huge thing, we restrict it to a tiny little meaning, and we say this is what it means. And I think a lot of biblical scholars, commentators don't get that. They don't understand that because they don't have the background in terms of classical Greek or so. If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. How have you encountered somebody who I mean, I imagine that there's probably scenarios where people have like a bad translation or a, you know, something that or they interpret something improperly, but then they can, from their wrong interpretation, pull something actually useful out, right? I imagine that kind of thing happens as well.
I suppose so. I can't think of any examples, but I suppose that could work somehow. But
yeah,
because often if there's a bad translation, that usually ends up derailing the thinking. Or
true.
so.
Yeah. Interesting. Good. Well, you want to get to the text, or what do you want to do, Richard?
Well, we can, we ended at verse 7, so we can start with verse 8 if you want.
Sure. I have, I'm not bringing up the interlinear this time.
Okay.
I just have the Greek. So if you don't mind, just translate it for us.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So let me share that. Okay. Remove that. Present. Okay. Stop screen share. Share screen. Share. Okay. We got it? Nope, we don't have it. There we go.
Okay. So, all right. So what text are you using? Where are you getting this one from?
This is on Bible Hub. This is
okay.
Sweet's Septuagint.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So go up one verse. You've got verse 8 to go to 7.
Okay.
Okay. So I've got Rolf's text, and verse 7 is verse 8.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
Remember, Jacob pointed this out.
Yeah.
So it depends on whether you number the little introductory mark on each psalm is that's verse 1 or not. And so Rolf's numbers that, counts that as verse 1. I guess I think in the Hebrew they do also. And some English translations do, others don't. So apparently the Sweet's version here is not counting that. So everything's going to be off by 1, which just makes it fun. So I've got verse 8 here, which is verse 7 up there. So the line, the first clause here, pandas theorundes me eximictiris ame. So everyone who is seeing me, watching me, mocked me or derided me or something. Okay.
Everyone who.
So, okay. Oh, this is different. Okay. So pandas, I don't have to use both. Pandas theorundes me. Okay. And then eximictiris ame. And what you've got here is ἀλάλησαν and χείλισαν in the middle of it. And then ἀκίνησαν κεφαλήν. Oh, I'm sorry. No. I'm looking. Okay. All right. Wait. Okay. Ἀλάλησαν. Okay, that's right. No, okay. So pandas to me is one line in Rolf's text. I'm going line by line in Rolf's text. So
okay.
That's why. And I guess this thing is printed verse by verse. Mine's going line by line.
I see.
So the next part of the verse is ἀλάλησαν and χείλισαν, ἀκίνησαν κεφαλήν, and there's no comma there, and then it goes on to verse 8 for you, 9. Íλπισαν εν Κύριον, επί Κύριον, ρισάστο αὐτόν, σωσάτο αὐτόν, ότι θέλει αὐτόν. And how's it? Okay, so if you notice on the text you got on the screen, there's the kephalin, there's no comma, there's no punctuation, and then ĺπισαν is a capital. And so this is indicating a quotation, because they had no quotation marks back then. And Rolf's text doesn't use quotation marks. This is a very modern thing.
Could you translate verse 7 again? I didn't catch that.
So starting with verse 7 at the beginning, so pandas theorundes me, the first phrase, everyone who's watching me or looking at me, eximictiris ame, they've mocked me, they've derided me, comma, and then ἀλάλησαν and χείλισαν, they spoke with their lips, and then ἀκίνησαν κεφαλήν, I think the translation would be they wagged their heads. So kino is to move. Any kind of, this is kino, any kind of movement. Right now you're moving your head slightly, that's kino. Mark is not, well, he is, but so any kind of movement is kino, but this is head. So in English we say we wagged our heads. We don't just move our heads. So people wagging their heads like this, like a negative or something. So this is the idea. So this is why the translating this is they wagged their heads is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, even though the word is move. And then as they're doing this, they're watching, they're deriding, mocking him, and they're shaking their heads, wagging their heads. And then they say, here's the quote, he hoped upon the Lord, he hoped in the Lord, let him save him, ἐρρύσω αὐτόν, so let him rescue him, so σώτου αὐτόν, let him save him, ότι θέλει αὐτόν, because he wants him, or he maybe trusts in him. The word here is θέλει. So if God really wants this guy on the cross, he'll come and get him. So there's no subject here.
Ότι θέλει,
ἐλπίσαν επικύριον ρισάστου αυτόν, σωσάτου αυτόν, ότι θέλει αυτόν. It's almost like if, and we're mocking this guy on the cross. He hoped in God, but if God really loves him, if God really wants him, then let God rescue him, let God save him. Okay. And of course, Jesus, quoted this on the cross. Okay, so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Any questions about anything? Or
so ρισάστο is rescue. Let him rescue.
Yeah. Oh, and there's that rough breathing should be right on top of the R of the row, not next to it. It looks like a quote mark, but it's not.
Okay.
So this is the print here, because an initial row often has the rough breathing. So
θέλει, I'm familiar with the vocabulary in the sense of like will, like monothelitism or something like that as a Greek verb.
Yeah.
And
Thelema is the noun, the will, the volition. But the verb thelo just means to want or wish or desire. It's like a general word.
Gotcha.
Okay. You want me to go on?
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 10, which up there is verse 9. Ότισι ο εξπάσας με γαστρός. And then because oti, you are the one who drew me out, pulled me out of the womb. And then the next line, Яλπίσμου από μαστῶν της μητρός μου, my hope from the breasts of my mother. And so this is, thinking about the birth. So where does this man come from? He's, God brought him. God brought him, gave him birth. He brought him from his mother's womb. He raised him, and now he's on the cross. And so,
and this is no longer a quote.
I don't think so, although it could be. No, probably not, because there's because of the pronoun see, you.
Yeah.
So it's changing the pronouns or so. There's one thing I understand about Hebrew that I've read, that often there would be changes in pronouns from first, second to second person, third person. Sometimes in the same verse, it sort of flips around, and it really makes it difficult to figure out who's saying what sometimes. And you can get the same thing in Greek, because they don't have to have a pronoun. You can just have a verb. And you've got to figure out, well, who's saying what now? So, and then verse 11, which is verse 10, actually, ἐπισέ. So ἐπισέ περίφην εκ μήτρας, ἀγίοις μητρός μου, θεός μου εἰσί. So this is a passive verb. So upon you, I was thrown from my mother. The idea, I think, is, God brought me forth from the womb. My mother, I was raised or being breastfed or something, and then the mother sort of tossed me onto God's hands or something like that. So I was tossed from my mother upon you, and then from the stomach, from the womb of my mother, you are my God. Okay, so this idea of even like with Jeremiah, even in the womb, God chose Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is God's person, because that's the way God chose him or something. I think this is the same kind of idea. The writer here is envisioning himself as I'm God's chosen one. I'm God's, he picked me, he gave me birth, he brought me forth, he weaned me, and even my mother gave me to him, and now I'm on the cross. And so where are you? This is part of the whole lament, why have you forsaken me? Where are you, my God? Okay.
Kilias. Was Kilias?
Kilia is the womb.
Okay, as opposed to gastros.
Yeah, gastros is like the stomach.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thλύψις ἐγγύς. What was that vocabulary? Thλύψις.
Which one?
Ότι θλίψεις ἐγγύς.
Which verse are you looking at?
Verse 11 on yours, 10 on my screen.
Oh, 10. Okay, 11. So ekelias mitrosmo.
Yeah, and then at the end of that's probably the next line. It says ότι θλίψεις ἐγγύς.
Okay, wait. Oh, there. Oh, I see. Wait. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so this is. Let me get my cursor up here so I can. 10, which is 11. Episepir. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is verse 12 now.
Oh.
So in Ralph's verse 11, this is okay. It starts with verse 10. Episepir mitros, mitros rather. Achilles mitros muisi. Okay, and then where it says ἀποστής, that starts verse 12 in Ralph's text.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So now we're two verses off.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me get my Ralphs.
Oh man.
Where did I put that? Oh, here we are. Okay, what is thλύψις? I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, thλύψις is like distress.
Okay.
Any kind of turmoil, persecution. So verse 12 here, which is the second half of verse 10 on the screen. Μη ἀποστείς από μου ότι θλίψεις ἐγγύς. So μη ἀποστείς, don't go away from me, don't stand off from me, basically.
Okay.
And then why? Because turmoil is near, tribulation is near. They've got the wrong accent on this. Thλύψεις should not have an acute, it should have a circumflex.
Okay.
So again, I'm thinking of in terms of the writer. I know this refers, this is like for Christians, this is a prophecy of Jesus on the cross, but I'm thinking of this text as the writer lamenting this pending doom or something. And here it's like he says, well, don't go away from me, don't stand off, don't turn your back on me, because turmoil, tribulation is coming, it's near. And then the next line, ότι ουκέστην ο βοηθῶν, and then, which is verse 11 here. So ότι ουκέστην ο βοηθῶν. So verse 11 on the screen is the second half of verse 12 in Rolf's. So why should not you turn yourself away? Because tribulation is coming, because there is no one to help. So o voithon is a general word for help, to give aid or assistance to. And ουκέστην, there isn't. So there's no one to help me, basically. If you turn your back on me, God, there's no one to help me, because I'm stuck in this wretched place. Okay. And now there's verse 12 on the screen. Okay, so that's the first half of verse 13 in Rolf's text. So moski poli, moskos is an ox, basically. So κατοικεῖς, they have surrounded me, moschi poli, many oxen. And then the next line, tavripiunes perieschome, fat bulls have come upon me, or so. Let's see, 13. They've surrounded me. So the image is like cattle. You know, there's oxen and there's bulls, and these are not little things. These are big ones. Have you ever had any face-to-face experiences with any real cattle?
Yeah, my parents just bought a ranch, and we have a bunch of cows.
Because they get really, really big.
they never circled me, but I am a little afraid of them.
Well, I know, especially when they get the horns on them or something.
Yeah.
And females are more tame, but the males, especially with the horns and everything, it can be really huge. And I remember it in Illinois when we were living on campus housing, and we could take a walk. If we went one way, we'd go to a neighborhood. We went another way down the street, we'd be in these fields, and they'd have cattle around and everything. And sometimes some of the cattle, like these are, I guess, the female ones, they'd trot over to see us sometimes. They were walking along or whatever because they're curious. Others would glare and stomp and then would think we better not get too close to the fence because it's going to charge at us. And the ones that came, pretty close, we could reach over and pet them or something. But these are giant animals or something. And so if you think about, and horses, I used to ride horses when I was much younger. And I've been on, I think the biggest horse I was ever had to ride was like an 18-hander, which is like a monster. And so some of these bulls are this huge thing. So if you get this picture of bulls, plural, oxen, plural, fat ones, these are not the little ones. These are really giant things circling, and what's going to happen if you don't get out of the way? They'll trample you. So this is kind of the image here. So it's not literally the animals, but these are the people that are attacking him or so.
Now, but Jesus, in our theology, it's important that Jesus, chose the death on the cross willingly.
Right. Yeah.
And this kind of gives the sense of helplessness.
Right. Yes, I know. But Jesus was the one who called out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I know a lot of Protestants, especially evangelicals, take this and they have this idea that God has removed himself from Christ or something. And I remember a few years ago, there was I sat in one of the catechism classes at evening vespers at Holy Cross, and one fellow who used to be a Protestant also, he said something to the effect of, how does he say it? This idea of separating, that God separated himself, removed himself from Christ or so. This is a really common notion among a lot of Protestants. And this fellow realized, if you say that, you're dividing the Trinity. And for Orthodox, the Trinity is one. The Father, Son, Holy Spirit, they're all one. And there's no division, right? No distinction. And this is a really big, significant issue with the Trinity. And so the concept that the Son can be split off from the Father divides the Godhood, which for Orthodox is impossible. It can never happen. And this fellow was talking about this and the ramifications of this kind of thinking. And then I realized he was saying that destroys the Trinity. And so these people that have this idea that God turned his back on Christ, separated himself, basically it's committing deicide, like suicide, basically, because God is killing himself, which he can't do. And so I heard that, and I thought this is really, really a powerful thought that is unfortunately doesn't register with a lot of Protestants. So,
yeah.
But here's, if you saw Christ is on the cross, why have you forsaken me? So in his humanity, he's been forsaken. In his humanity, he dies, but Christ as God doesn't die, right?
I emailed Father Thomas Hopko years ago about this when I was a catechumen, and he responded, and I could probably find his email. He wrath of God. I wish I could. Where is it? I haven't looked for it in years. Productions, wrath of God. I can't find it. I'm not seeing it. I'll try to dig it up. But the basic gist was he said, the basic gist is that he said was that he thinks of he connects it to, I believe it's in Genesis, when that the forsaking is connected to the same forsaking in Genesis, where a man shall forsake his mother and father, and cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And so he connects the forsaking as part of to like Christ being wedded to the church.
Okay.
So anyway,
Interesting.
Joseph Razin says, where is the cross here? Is Richard reading that in? Hey, join in, Joseph. That'd be great if you join in and converse with us. Joseph, I believe, is he's a Jew, and I think I saw you on Jacob's stream the other day, and he referred to you as the rabbi. I think is that you, Joseph? Where is the cross here? Is Richard reading that in? I don't think we talked about the cross, other than the fact that we're just talking about how Christians have interpreted this chapter. We tend to interpret it in light of the fact that Jesus was reciting this psalm on the cross. And so, the imagery is all tied together for us. And obviously that's what the Gospels say happened, is that Jesus read or recited this on the cross. And so it's all tied together for us. But yeah, so I wouldn't say we're reading it into it, but we're looking, we're just reading the psalm in light of the fact that Jesus was reciting it. I think is that a fair response, Richard? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about amongst biblical scholars, especially evangelicals or so, and they want to take the historical context of whatever the text is, which is fine, and I don't have a problem with that. And the problem I have personally with a lot of the evangelicals is that they want to stop with the historical aspect, especially in the Old Testament. They can't always, because of all the quotations and everything. So this is one example of how, even for evangelicals, they can't stop with only the historical context, because this psalm is quoted by Jesus on the cross anyway, so that pulls it into the New Testament. But if you look at the psalm, just as Psalm 22, this is the 21, 22, because the numbering is different. Just as a text by itself, not in the book of Psalms, just one document by itself. Well, what exactly is the historical context? I don't even know what that is. All we know is it was written by David. Okay, so fine. So when exactly did you read this? Was this written before he became king, when he's on the run from Saul? Did he write this when he was hiding out in Moab or something? Because we know about David's history, but when exactly he wrote this and under what circumstances, we just don't know. So here's this thing that was written at some point, and reading it just as it is, as a text, even in Greek, there's this fellow who's suffering some traumatic situation of being surrounded, of being attacked, or imminently attacked. He may be fearing for his life, and he writes this lament, and I need some help. My friends have gone away. There's no one to help me. God did not even help me. And so this is kind of the way I'm looking at this thing right now, going through this as a text at the moment. And then Christians would take this, of course, and then pull it into the New Testament as a prophecy of Christ. But in the context, then there's not, it's not there, but then that doesn't mean it couldn't be there. Of course, with the Orthodox Christians, there's the historical, literal rendering, and then there's the spiritual meaning on top. There's typology, and allegory, and these other things that are actually very, very important.
Yeah, Jesus recited this on the cross, and why would he have recited it? Why would that have come to his mind?
I don't know. I wasn't there to ask him.
Right. But that's kind of what we're pondering, is what is the connection, right? I wouldn't say that we're reading the crucifixion into it. We're simply, it's fitting to the moment.
Right. Yeah.
But I totally understand where you're coming from, Joseph. Joseph says, yes, that was me, but I'm not a rabbi. We just call you that. The psalm predates the Roman crucifixion, though, whether we take David as the psalmist or not. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Well, yeah, at least by 1,000 years, I would say probably. I mean, I'm assuming David's the the writer because it's in the first verse, you know, the little prologue, I guess, or so, the introductory line. So I have no problem with David being the author. Assuming he's the author, then this thing is, you know, predating Christ by about a millennium, more or less. And of course, Roman crucifixion wasn't around at that time. But for me, that's not even an issue. So again, I have no problem with the original historical context, which is kind of silly to talk about because we have no idea what it is. There's no evidence for it. We could speculate. I could have all sorts of ideas, like I just threw some things out, running from Saul, Moab, hiding in Moab. I mean, there's possibilities, but we don't know exactly even that. I mean, if you want to question David's authorship, then who wrote this? If David didn't write it, then that throws the door open to anything, anyone, anytime, for any reason, and there's no way to pin anything down. All you have is this fellow who's complaining about these things, and then you've got to figure out, well, why is he saying this? Why the lions? Why the bulls? You know. So everything becomes more and more interpretive, trying to figure out and explain where this thing came from.
You know, as I'm reading this psalm, you know, obviously, as a Christian, all of these images of the crucifixion come to mind immediately. But also, you know, it's the type. It's that feeling of helplessness and of feeling abandoned is a very human thing that, you know, we can relate to, and this is a good prayer, you know, for everybody. And I imagine that for Jews and Christians, like this has been this psalm takes it is used as a lament, I suppose, a lamentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, totally understand, Joseph. Jews often pray the psalm non-Christologically. I would say I think Christians probably do too. Like I was saying, like we don't well immediately the Christological things will come to mind because we're Christians, but also, you know, this is more than just that, right? We also we identify with this, and we pray this as well. So. Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, Rick, we've been going for an hour and 12 minutes. Are you how you doing on time?
You can go a little bit longer.
Okay, cool. You want to go back to the text again?
Sure. My clock says 6:08, but
yeah. Hang on, I have to remember how to do this. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so yeah, you have to find out from everybody watching if this is okay or not, doing it this way, because I've got verse 14, which now is what? Okay. Where's verse 14 is not 14, ήμειξαν. So where's ήμειξαν? Oh,
ήμειξαν is 13 on the screen.
Oh, okay, so 14 for me is 13 up there. Okay, so the phrase.
Try next time, Rick. I'll try to get Rolf's.
Okay. And if anybody else is watching this, and if they don't have Rolf's text, they might have something else. I know there's Brent, is it Brentley or somebody, and there's a couple other editions around of the Greek text, which is fine on the one hand, but if someone's using a different edition, then they've got to know that, sort of be, you know, clear on where exactly we're going, because of these verses that are kind of off sometimes. So anyway, verse 14, which is verse 13, ήνιξαν επεμέ το στόμα αυτών, ως λέον ο αμαρτωλών και ο ριόμενος. So I know I mentioned something the last session or so about kind of taking things phrase by phrase, which is fine, but this whole thing is one long phrase. You can't really stop. So the ήμειξαν is the aorist of anego, to open. So ήμειξαν επεμέ το στόμα αυτών. So they opened their mouth against me, and then os leon o arpazon ke euriomenos, as a lion that claws and shreds or something.
Did you say πνίξαν is aorist?
Yes. Aorist, yeah, aorist active, πνίξαν, aního. So also I said, I guess I should mention for the sake of people watching, I'm using the modern pronunciation of this stuff, like a Greek. So in case anyone's scratching their heads thinking, what is he saying and where is he? I can't understand it.
That would be an interesting thing to discuss during one of these.
If you really want to, but
yeah, it would be interesting because I probably some people are baffled.
no, okay.
You know, many people who have studied Greek are familiar with the
Erasmian,
Erasmian pronunciation only. So you're probably throwing them for a loop, some of these people. But yeah, this is a modern Greek pronunciation you're using.
Yeah. And in the church, in the Orthodox Church, when they recite anything, chant anything, they always use the modern pronunciation anyway. So if you're in an Orthodox church and they're reciting this, they would chant πνίξαν ἐπέμετος αὐτόν ως λέον παραπάζον και ορiomenos. They go on like that, and they go super fast. But so that's what you get. That's what you hear. So if you're not familiar with the modern pronunciation, you get lost within a half a second or so. But
yes. I forgot what was πνίξαν again. Sorry,
it's opened.
Opened. They
open a door. Open your mouth. Open anything. Open like this. The verb is ανοίγω, and so the aorist is πνίξαν.
They opened to me.
Well, okay, ἐπέμαι, not to, but more like against.
Against me.
So they opened upon me, literally upon me, their mouth. Το στόμα αὐτών, the mouth of them. So basically, they opened their mouth against me because they're remember in verse 8, they're mocking, they're deriding me. So in terms of mocking and deriding, they open their mouth against me. They're again, there's more mockery here. And there's another metaphor, another image, like a lion, which is clawing and digging or something. So the verb here, oriomenos, okay. At the end of verse 13 on the screen, this is the same verb as pierced in a couple of verses. So the verb also doesn't mean just pierce, but it can mean gouge or dig. So think of a lion with the claws, So arpazon, they're snatching and clawing. I used to have cats when I was a kid, and every now and then my cat would scratch me or something. So you get these little baby claws ripping into my arm or something, and that's not fun. So
arpazon?
Arpazon is grasp.
Okay.
Snatch. So the lion is basically pawing, mauling. Think of the lion mauling. So he's got these nice claws ripping the person apart. This is the metaphor, the image. So there's bulls, right? So these are the people that are surrounding me, the enemy, and so they're viewed as oxen. They're viewed as bulls. Now there's a lion. So this is the image of being attacked by wild animals. And if you think about just in terms of even in maybe some of the traditional old Jewish ideas, there's the Yehudim versus the Goyim. And there's us and them, the Gentiles, the pagans. They're animals. They don't understand. They have darkness. They're lost. This kind of thing. And you even get some of this imagery elsewhere in the Psalms. And so it's almost like here these enemies of the writer, and they're being viewed as these wild animals that are just trying to kill him or something. And this is why he's crying out for deliverance. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or?
No, that's interesting.
Going on.
That the oriomenos appears here. That's interesting. And yeah.
Yeah, I know Jacob mentioned the last time that the imagery of the lion is kind of pervasive through this psalm. So I really hadn't thought about that too much until he said that. But here's lion imagery, and of course, this is going to come on later on with verse 16 or so about the lion or something. But so verse 15 for me, O sea, Ethor, which is 14 up there. Osi ethor exehethin. So again, there's another metaphor, os, or osi, as or as if. So exehethin, I was poured out. This is an aorist passive.
Like
So,
water.
like water, yeah. So I was, so think of a jug of water. So I'm in the jug and I'm just being poured out. So if you got a jug of water, you can do something with it. You dump it on the ground, it's gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not just being attacked by wild beasts, now my soul, my life, in a sense, is being poured out as water. Okay, and then the next line in Ralph's text, "Ke diascorpisti pandato stamu." And then all my bones, pandato stamu, all the bones of me are in my bones, and then the escorpisti have been scattered. So this is another passive. So scorpizo is like to throw things around. You take a bunch of dirt or something and heave it out, or think about fertilizing a lawn. You take your fertilizer and just sort of throw it out. This is the idea of being chucked about or something. So my bones are being thrown all over the place. It's almost like he envisions himself being almost a corpse now. He's been shredded by the lions, torn to smithereens, and now his bones are just being tossed off to the winds or something. Okay. So of course, if this really happened, he wouldn't be able to write it. But he's imagining, this is what he's envisioning is going to happen unless help comes. So I'm thinking of just the text, and just this one psalm ahead of me.
I think of like confusion, or like being, you don't know where being poured out like water. It's like it sounds like being wasted away and being confused.
Yeah. Well, I think even St. Paul used the same image about, I think in one of his letters to Timothy or so, about he's on the verge of being poured out as a libation or something, in terms of his pending martyrdom or so. I think it's the same kind of image that he used. My life is being poured out or about to be poured out or something, to be like a sacrifice. And the one of the common sacrifices for the pagan Greeks was a libation. You would take water, or not water, but usually wine or something, and then they poured out. They had a little ceremony with some prayers or something to the gods or whatever. But,
and being the bones being scattered, it sounds like someone who doesn't know where to turn, or they're being pulled in different directions. Or
I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the image in my mind is what the wording here is you envision yourself, imagine your own death, not dying in old age in at home with your family or something, but being, on a battlefield or something, maybe, or if you're being chased or so, and you're about to be killed, and your body gets shot up or something, or bombed. What happens to it? What do you want with your body after you die? Most people say, well, I want to be buried or something. Maybe today with cremation, it's not so much common. I don't know, but I imagine people would like to think, once I die, I want my body to be dealt with properly and then buried in a cemetery or something, so my loved ones can go there or whatever or something. I don't think most people would even think about the idea of, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go off to the desert and let someone shoot me up and leave me there. So the idea of dying somewhere, especially being shredded by wild animals and having your bones just left out there in the open. I know for the Greeks it was repellent. For the ancient Jews it was also repellent. You just don't do this. For the ancient Greeks, the worst death was won by sea, because the body was lost in the water and they couldn't retrieve it. So that was the worst thing possible. And so for the Greeks, I think for the Romans too, most of the ancient peoples, a dead body had to be dealt with properly, either burned like most of the pagans, or buried or something. It's a supreme insult to kill somebody and just leave them. That's why the Romans or the Assyrians would kill people, impale their body on a wall or on a tree or something and just leave it to rot. That's like the supreme insult. You just don't do that kind of thing. It's a total disregard for the person. And so it's kind of like here. Now I'm being surrounded by these people, these enemies who are conceived as lions or animals, they're going to shred my body and then dump it out into the dirt. Just leave it there. Okay.
And since you mentioned the being impaled and left to rot on a wall, that's what happened to Benjamin and Saul's bodies, right?
Yeah. And
then David went and recovered them.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because to leave the body out like that was just a horrible insult. So I forget who did that. I don't remember which pagan kings did that. It was
I forgot.
Anyway, but so say it was either the Amalekites or the Moabites, whoever they were. This is their way of insulting David. You know, here's his brother, his son, or whoever. Kill him, hang him up, and leave him there. And maybe it's like maybe they conceived of it as partly a trap. You know, we'll do this, and he'll come to get the body, and then we can kill him too. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And David, he sees Saul, he sees him as God's anointed one, and he can't let that insult stand. I can't remember if Saul was impaled like that, but I'm pretty sure Benjamin was.
I think so. Yeah, no, Saul killed himself. He was wounded or something. Then he ordered his shield bearer to run him through. He refused, and he grabbed a sword and impaled himself with a sword. But the body wasn't tossed off anywhere. I think they took the body back and buried it properly.
Okay, so he was the impaling on the wall did not apply to Saul. Is that your understanding?
I don't know. Not to Saul. I don't think so. But I'm just thinking of the practice.
Gotcha.
The Akkadians, the Assyrians would do this kind of thing. And a lot of pagan cultures. I mean, Israel, ancient Israel is surrounded by the Edomites, the Amalekites, all these other groups. That are just mutual enemies. And so what better way to insult somebody than to slaughter people and leave them out in the open? That's just sort of their pagan practice of humiliating and denigrating the enemy.
Yeah. So
in the terms of the psalm here, in terms of the wording, it's almost like the writer envisions this is what's going to happen to me unless some help comes. This is what maybe he's afraid of or something.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the past tenses are used, but then in Old Hebrew, they only had two tenses anyway, so you can't put too much on the verb tenses in Greek, because the Greeks had 7 tenses to choose from. Hebrew only had 2, so you've got to have to go from 2 to 7, and they've got to pick something. So, and the aorist was often used in narrative anyway for different reasons, but. Okay. Okay. So where's the next part of verse?
Εγεννήθη καρδία μου.
Yeah. Εγεννήθη καρδία μου. Where is that here? Oh, there. Okay. So verse 14, the second half of verse 14. Εγεννήθη καρδία μου, ως οικειρός δικόμενος εν μέσω της κοιλίας μου. So there's the os again in the middle of this. So εγεννήθη καρδία μου, and my heart became, basically, and then as osi gyrosti as some melted wax, or wax that is melting, and then in the middle of my belly. So think of body parts. Where's your heart? It's up in your chest. Where's your stomach is below. So if you think of just in terms of anatomy, so my heart has become like melting wax in the middle of my stomach or something. So imagine the sensation of the heart in the chest just melting into the stomach, which is below. So just the way our bodies are constructed, the heart's above, the stomach's below. And just this image of, not just being shredded now, but melting, because the turmoil, the thlīψις earlier is so extreme here.
And earlier there was Kilias, was my mother's womb, right? From the womb.
Right.
And before that was gastros.
Yeah. So in English, we're used to thinking of a womb as this specific thing, and the stomach is that specific thing, and we like to keep them separate and everything. In Greek, it's much looser. So depending on the context, it could be one or the other or both. They weren't so anal about their body parts as we are. So yeah, the kilia is the womb. It could be, when we say abdomen, right? What's in the abdomen? How many body parts are inside your abdomen?
Like stomach and everything.
Yeah, everything. So what do you mean by everything? There's the intestines, the colon, right, the pancreas, the gall, the bladder, and whatever else is there. There's all this stuff in there. And so the Greeks, and they knew about all these things. They would do not autopsies, but they had their they knew about body parts. They knew a lot more about body parts than we think we think that they did, but they knew a lot about it. They weren't always clear on what exactly they did, but they knew these things were in there. But then all this stuff is inside the body. So that whole area, abdomen, could be gastros, it could be kilia. It would depend on whether you're referring to a man or a woman or whatever or something. So it's just it's squishier than what we're used to.
Gotcha.
And it's not a problem for them. It's a problem for modern readers who want to be too precise about things and insist on, well, this word has to be this and that word has to be that, and you can't ever have them go together. And the Greeks think, well, here's your two words, and they kind of like this sometimes. And well, yeah, you can do this or this, and it's all right. It's not a problem. They weren't so obsessed with things like we are. No. Okay, then the next line. So verse 16 for me, which is verse 15, right?
Yep.
So this is interesting. Here's the os again. So every time you see an os, this is like as. It's a metaphor or a comparison. So the subject here is my strength, and my strength is dried up as a potsherd. Osterkon, this is any kind of bit of a clay pot or something. So the pot itself is made out of clay. If you break the pot, you've got a piece of fired clay. And that piece of fired clay, no matter how big it was, would be osterkon.
So it's brittle.
Yeah, very brittle. So you think my strength and then dried up. So if you have a new pot, like my wife likes gardening. She just bought a new planter about yay big or something, and it's brand new. It's made out of clay, and we can use it for things. A while back, we were moving some of my mother-in-law's old things in her house, and there was the same kind of design. Well, those kind of orangey pots that people like to use for planting things in. But my mother-in-law had one that was so old, we tried to lift it up, and the bottom just sort of stayed on the ground, and the whole thing kind of fell apart because it was so old. And we've been seeing it out in the sun and just sitting out there for years and years and years or something. So I imagine this kind of image here that the pottery is so old it just sort of collapses. Okay, and so the wording here, my strength, is dried up like a potsherd, not even a pot, but a broken pot or something. Again, this is image of being completely helpless, completely overrun, overwhelmed with the impending doom. Okay. And then the next line, Yehlosa, ke Yehlosamu, ke kolite, to larangimu. And so my tongue has been glued to my throat. So imagine, have you ever been so thirsty that your mouth is so totally dried you can barely talk? Have you had that experience at all? Okay, so if you've had that experience, you can imagine what he's feeling like. That my tongue has been glued to my throat, sort of stuck back here, and I can't even talk. I can't even make a noise hardly because it's so dried up and everything. And then the last part here, Kis hun thanatu katira yezma. And so you have brought me to the dirt of death, or so, the brink of death.
To the brink of death?
Yeah, well, you could almost say that. Well, I guess hun thanatu, which is interesting. Is hun thanatu, because hus is dirt, basically. And then the thanatu is death. So let's see. So the Revised Standard says, you lay me in the dust of death.
I guess when one is dead, they're drying up. Their bones are dry. You know,
yeah, they dry up and
that they return to dust.
Right. But the image here is like, κατοικεῖς, you singular, because like the writer here is speaking to God again, right? Why have you forsaken me? And we're back to the singular again. So you have led me to the basically the grave. The people were buried in the dirt of death, or something. So he's as good as dead, and his bones are shredded, and he can't talk. He's just dried up, and he's just like a rotting, dried corpse, half buried in the dirt or something. And then who did this? It's you, and it's the singular, you singular, because he's appealing to God, I think. So again, asking for I need help, right? So I'm wondering if this is like halfway through the psalm. Help comes later on, but at the end of the psalm. So this is not totally hopeless. It seems to be completely hopeless, and
yeah,
I think this is the image, and especially if a lot of people will just read this quickly, kind of read through the thing, especially in English or something, and they would read through the whole thing all at one time and not really dwell necessarily on every line or something, but going through the text like in Greek, like this, line by line, thinking about each thing, trying to translate each line, each word, makes you sort of slow down and think about the words that are on the page and what they mean, how they go together, and the one verse leads to the next, and things are bad. They get worse. The bulls become lions, and now there's my bones are scattered. Now I'm buried. I mean, it seems really, really hopeless.
Yeah.
Again, this is the writer thinking. I could almost imagine originally the writer just imagining this is what's going to happen if I don't get the help I need to save me from my enemies, whoever they were, whether the Moabites or the Amalekites or something. So.
Yeah. Okay. And the next verse is the one that we've been talking about for weeks.
Yeah. So should we finish with that one?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay.
I think we beat it to death already.
So verse 17 here in Rolf's, or 16, I guess, and some others. So, Oti akikosam makines poli, and so many dogs have surrounded me. Sinagoyi poni revomenon periaschome. And then orexan hiras mokipodas is the last part here. So the first phrase, many dogs have surrounded me or circled me or so. And again, I think of a pack of wolves. In my younger days hiking, I've tangled with brown bears occasionally in Yosemite National Park. I've tangled with high coyotes, which are easy to deal with because coyotes are usually loners. And I my dog with me would tear after the coyotes anyway. So I've come to face to face with coyotes in the wild, but there are wolves. And so wolves are pack animals. Coyotes are generally, I've never seen a pack of coyotes in the daytime. I guess they would maybe hunt that way in the evening, but I've always seen one at a time. And
I see them one at a time, but then you hear them as a
I know
pack.
they're horrible. I know. So I grew up in Southern California in the mountains, and we'd have these coyotes in the middle of the night howling away, and it just sounded blood curdling. But seeing them face to face in the mountains or something, there's just one here, and I'm thinking, well, where's another? There's never another one. But the wolves are much bigger, like twice the size of a coyote, and they're always in packs. I'd much rather have to tangle with a coyote than a wolf.
Yes. And
so I think of this, the surrounding, when a pack of wolves is coming after, their prey, they're going to isolate the animal or maybe even the person, maybe in Alaska or something, and then surround the victim before they pounce or something. So this whole idea of being surrounded by wolves is just, really, really terrifying. I would not want to be in that kind of situation. Right. So again, you think of the animals. We've gone from bulls to a lion. Now there's a pack of wolves. Maybe they're called dogs, but and so back then they had wolves. Maybe they were hyenas for all we know. I don't know, wild dogs or something. And then we've got the synagogi ponirevomenon, so the assembly of evildoers or of the wicked or so. Synagogi is the word where we get our word synagogue. So you could translate it as synagogue here, but that's kind of misleading because presumably in the 10th century BC, if David was writing this, they didn't have synagogues back then. But this is like the assembly. Any kind of group of people would be a synagogi. But who are they? Ponirevomenon, of those who do evil. So this is like a participle, evildoers. So now we've gone from animals to humans, and these are wicked humans, basically. And again, and they've surrounded me. They've encompassed me or so. And then so they've gouged my hands and my feet.
And what's the significance of using the different vocabulary ἀκύκλωσαν and περιέσχον? Is that those both mean encircled or encompassed?
Yeah, right. Well, remember parallelism. So in the Psalms, in Hebrew, one of the aspects of Hebrew poetry is parallelism. You see the same thing twice, and often use different nouns, different verbs. And one line is with one thing. You've got two lines or so, and it's just the same thing. It's just twice over, but you varied the words. And I think I mentioned in a previous session, this is one aspect of I know it's an aspect of Hebrew poetry, but it's one aspect of poetry in general that actually can be translated, because most poetry, you can translate the meaning, but you lose the rhythm and the sense and the feel of the words, the sounds. You can't keep that in from one language to another. But with parallelism, you can retain that. You lose different words, of course, in English or Hebrew or Russian or whatever, or something, but you can retain this parallelism. So I think this is part of it. It's just the part of the poetic aspect of this song. Remember, all the Psalms are poems anyway. So here's this poem of destruction, of doom coming, but it's still a poem. Okay, so
also going back, you mentioned earlier that օրύξαν, that word shows up earlier.
Yeah,
Ορυόμενος, and that's the lion, adpazon, grasps and gouges or something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. I'm sorry. I made it. No. Oops. No, sorry. Okay, go back up to where you were. Oriome. Sorry. All this. Okay, so verse 13 there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is not okay. Oriome. That's roaring.
Oh, roaring. Okay, it's a different word altogether.
It's similar, but it's
okay. Gotcha.
The lion, and arpazon is the grasping, the ripping, and roaring. So
gotcha,
growling or so. So I'm sorry. That's and then if you go down to the other one, ωρύξαν,
ωρύξαν.
Yeah,
different word altogether. Okay.
Yeah, it looks really similar. So there's especially the root in the middle.
Yeah.
Rho ύψιλον. So this is ἐρρύσω, which is a different word. That's the one for dig or gouge. It's translated pierce, but it can also mean gouge.
Okay.
Because let's see, ἐρρύσω, the verb ἐρrύσω is like to dig a grave, dig a trench. But it can mean gouge, like you take a knife or something and ram it through your arm or something. So,
gotcha.
So,
awesome.
All right, so it's
I think the flow of what we did today was working a little bit better because I wasn't interrupting you with the Hebrew.
Okay. And so the next time we can start with verse 18.
Yeah, let's do that.
Which is what, 17?
Yeah, in sweets it is 17.
Ἐρρύθμισαν.
Okay, and in Rolf's it is 18.
Okay.
And I'll try to get see if I can find. I'm sure I can find a Rolf's version to put up here so we're all in sync. Be a little less confusing.
Okay.
So. Okay. I was thinking about a little bit more about Yosef's point. He said, I hear you. My point was more that you are offering a translation, but keep weaving in the phrase on the cross. I think it's worth keeping this separate. Jew, of course, pray this psalm non-Christologically.
Yeah.
We started out where this whole discussion about this psalm came from originally was, and you know this, Yosef, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that Jacob brought it up because he was talking about how when Jesus on the cross says the first words of this psalm, how he immediately recognized that it's referring to reciting the whole psalm. And so that's kind of where we started from. And for sure, like when I'm reading the Psalms or reading this in particular, or reading the scriptures in general, because I'm a Christian, and for Christians, the New Testament, it has a certain supremacy for us. I would say, like the Gospels in particular, not the New Testament in general, but the Gospels in particular. So when we come across this stuff, we immediately are thinking of it in those terms, and that can obscure, it can obscure other meanings, or I'm not my initial reaction on reading the psalm is going to be, I'm going to think about Jesus saying it on the cross. That's just naturally, because that's where I come from. But I think to sort of back up and read it line by line, like you said, Richard, you didn't necessarily refer to that constantly. I kept bringing it up, but there's, to just read it simply on its own is something that can be missed if we're always trying to, if we're always thinking about, okay, well, what does this mean in light of Jesus saying it on the cross? But what I was doing is trying to, think about it in terms of the literature that's being tied together, because the Gospels are trying to tie the two things together. So that's where I was coming from. But that can, to Yosef's point, that can sort of obscure other meanings too, or prevent us from looking at it on its own. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Well, not offhand, but like you, I'm Christian and Orthodox, and so of course reading this, Christians read the Old Testament as a precursor to the New. We read the New Testament as a fulfillment of the Old, and that's just part of the Christian ethos. And of course, Jews don't have that attitude because they don't have the New Testament, so their understanding will be different, which is fine. But I know when I read the Psalms all the time anyway. I read them on a daily basis as part of my morning prayers and everything. And so I read these things, and often I just read through them, and I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, here's this Christian interpretation of this verse or something. I just sort of take the psalm as a psalm, and like with this one here, this is, of course, it's right there at the beginning. My God, why have you forsaken me? But reading the whole thing as part of my morning prayers, it's like this is a plea for help. In a horrible situation, and if I'm facing a horrible situation personally, and I read this, I would think not so much Jesus on the cross, but okay, God, why have you forsaken me? I'm the one that needs help now because this issue is coming up or something. I'm facing this problem or something, and it would become very personal for me just to read the psalm and not even think so much about Jesus saying this, but it becomes my prayer to God about I need the help now. I'm the one who has these problems or something or whatever, even though the metaphors is really, really graphic in terms of the animals and the ripping and the assault and everything. I've never had to face that really in terms of somebody trying to literally kill me or something. But I can kind of take the attitude, the feeling of helplessness, what am I going to do now? And that's kind of what happens to me when I read a lot of these things. So I don't think of the original context on the one hand. I don't necessarily think of the Christian interpretation necessarily. It just becomes, because this is the prayer book of the church, so it becomes my prayer book. And as I read these, I really gravitate towards this one or that one based on my personal situation or something, my feeling. If I'm really depressed, one of them is really encouraging. If I'm really happy, maybe I can read something that's kind of depressing and think, well, that's a downer. So that's just the way, these things are there. It's like a way of talking to us and our way of talking back to him. And it becomes relevant depending on my personal situation.
I sometimes when I come across a verse in the Psalms where it says something like, I didn't do anything to deserve this, or, I didn't disobey any of your commandments or anything like that, or something like that. I always have trouble in identifying with that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can understand that, but not that I've read those verses too, and I never think, well, I'm so perfect, I've never sinned. That's not true. But sometimes when I see that kind of thing, I think of, especially like the newspapers or something, and there's this horrible shooting, a mass shooting or whatever, some nasty thing that's happened, and I would never do that kind of thing. So when I see a verse like that, I think, well, yeah, I'm not as nasty as these people going around murdering people or something at a mall. I'm not shooting up a school or something. So in that sense, I've done nothing wrong. That doesn't mean I'm not a sinner. But I'm thinking like comparing gross, wild, wacko, really depraved public acts of sin versus my own stupidity, my own attitude or something. So my own stupidity is something for me to deal with, and my wife sees it or something maybe, but nobody else does necessarily. But so I don't know if that makes any sense. But.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes. Yeah, I mean, we have this like repentant attitude, and we have this sort of like a kind of a form of self-abasing repentance.
Yeah, and
that can go too far, and then we just are, just always. I mean, we read like monastic texts and stuff like that. They're always like, "Oh, I'm dung, I'm nothing," and it's true, I'm nothing. But you take that too far, right?
Right.
Yeah. How's it going, Andrew?
Good. How about y'all?
Good. Have you met Rick and Mark before?
Yeah, I remember Andrew.
Okay, good.
Have you been baptized yet, or when does that come up?
Yep. Just last week. So.
Oh, last week. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
What name did you take?
I kept mine. Just Andrew.
Andrew. Okay. Good. And Rick is Andrew as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is it any particular which Andrew did you?
Apostle.
Okay, that's me too. The first call. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Congrats, man. Did you go to Chino?
Only for the dinner,
Nice.
the Thursday dinner. Yeah, I've actually got midterms this week, so.
So, Rick and Mark, you guys may not be familiar, may not know that there was a conference in Chino, and that's where Jacob and a lot of the guys were on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and basically it was a bunch of the people that are sort of involved around these YouTube channels that we're doing. So it's just a small niche of people that are following this stuff. But they had Jonathan Pajot and John Vervaeke, Pastor Paul Vanderclay, and a few other people there. So did you meet any interesting people, Andrew?
I met another convert Copt, so that was
really?
Interesting. Yeah. Yep.
So my recent godson, his name's Thomas. He was just baptized Demetrios on Lazarus Saturday, and his brother is going to St. Mary Coptic Church here in Roseville.
Nice.
So he's kind of like taking a slightly different attack. So,
Well, congratulations on the baptism.
yeah, he's a good dude. He's getting he's taking his, I don't know what you call it. He's trying to get into his residency for medical school. Like, he's finished medical school, but he's trying to get placed at a hospital, so he has to take these tests. And so it's a big test, and it was today. I need to call him and find out how it went. But yeah, good dude. So, well, Rick, are you you got to get going?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So I mentioned in my email to you earlier about the next time, because I'll be in Greece for a couple of weeks in the middle of June.
Okay.
And so
you're going to return on the 19th. Okay, you're going to be next day for 5th. It would be the 5th. Okay, going to leave 7th June. Okay, so we'll just reconvene
on the so maybe the 26th of June, because on the 5th we're leaving on the 7th on Wednesday. So that's we'll be packing and getting these together. My youngest son is flying up to go with us also.
Okay.
I'm not sure that'll be a good time to do this again. And then the 12th and the 19th will be out of the country.
Gotcha. Okay, so that sounds good. Let's plan on the 26th then. I'm going to be traveling in June as well, so that'll work good for me.
Okay.
Thanks.
You have verse 18 or so. And
yep.
At the next time. All right.
Yeah. Thank you very much. You put a lot of work into the handout, and it shows, and I very much appreciate you. And I'm having fun. I hope you are too, and we can.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, you're welcome. Congratulations again.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'll see you in a month.
All right. I'm gonna
see you on Sunday, Mark.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep going. If anybody wants to stick around, if anybody wants to join in, I'm gonna stick around for a bit. So see you later, Richard. Thank you very much.
Rick, we'll see you.
So, Andrew, last time we met, I was telling Mark about. Do you follow Burn Power, Andrew?
I'm afraid not. No.
Okay. So Mark was a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist, and he's a recent convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. And yeah, and I heard on Burn Power.
11th hours, people like me.
11th.
So we're the 11th hour disciples. So.
And Mark's story reminded me of an interview that Burn Power hosted on his channel with a guy named Ellis Potter, and he was actually a Buddhist monk. And his description of his conversion to Christianity was very interesting, because it was intense. Like, he had a very, very intense experience. And when he started going to Christian churches, his questions were really intense. He wanted to know, okay, what's the answer to this? And people just didn't know. They just did not know the answer, and they couldn't give him a good answer that would satisfy him. But he didn't give up or think, oh, this is stupid. You know, I suppose he was convinced of the truth he was convinced of Christianity a priori, and he was trying to understand. Right? Mark, how did you take that?
Yeah, I took it that way too. And his questions made people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, in the other Christians, because not everybody digs like that. That's that's a kind of a personality type in a way. So, so I took it the same way, basically. And then I went out to his website, and apparently, even as a child, he was always why. So, and apparently, he never grew out of that, So, which is a good thing. So,
and depending on the situation, I could see that getting annoying. Like,
I don't have kids of my own, but Uncle Mark, I try to be I was the fun uncle. But it's finally, it's like, okay, yeah, we're going to put in Land Before Time again, because no more questions. ice cream and Land Before Time, and Uncle Mark needs some downtime.
So you sought out Christianity as a result of an experience as in your Buddhist practice.
Yeah, basically, how to put this without sounding like I need to be on meds or something, but basically, I had an experience that I sat down for my normal Buddhist practice, and the form of Zen Buddhism I practiced. I think in Greek Orthodoxy you call it plani, and then it's but basically it's where you can be self-deluded, where you see visions or whatever.
Okay.
And prelest in that. Well, we have that in Zen Buddhism as well. It's called makyo. So when you are doing your meditation, you do not. Your mind can go off and just create, a multi-screen cinema, but you're not watching that. It's just going off doing its thing because you are centering and focusing. So you're not following whatever your mind is doing. But something happened that kind of just blew that all apart, and it was an experience that because I was just meditating on the Zen koan that I'd been given by my teacher, and it was annoying me because it was revealing things about myself that I don't think I liked, and I didn't know it at the time, but it all just kind of blew up in I was just sitting there, and when I got up, I knew, and by the way, so I knew I had partied and stuff with, Catholic priests and stuff like that. So I didn't want to be Catholic and all of that. So I walked away completely from Christianity, but I'd never investigated. I knew nothing about Orthodoxy. I just figured it was like Catholicism, except behind the Iron Curtain or something. So I must say by that time, obviously, all the few decades, I wasn't that. I'd left before I'd investigated it. And, but when I got up, I knew then that I went straight to my computer, and because I knew I had to look at Orthodoxy. I looked up Orthodoxy. The first thing I did was check what did they believe the Nicene Creed, because that's the most important thing. And then I typed in Google Orthodox Church near me, and that was Elevation of the Holy Cross, even though there's one actually closer, but the first one that came up was Elevation, which was perfect with the people that met me when I first went. But so it was like I say, 5-6 years ago, if you would have asked me that if I was going to be Christian, let alone something like Orthodox, I would have I wouldn't have laughed at you because I'm polite, but it would have been like, oh yeah, because I was one of those people that didn't think much of Christianity or Christians anymore. So yeah, it was a kind of blew through all my Zen control of my consciousness and stuff, and I in my head saw things and knew things, and that were right, and I didn't know it, and it was one of those things that I don't know, you just can't say no to. But yes, you can. I could have, but I didn't, because it was the most real thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Wow.
Wow. And I don't know why, because I guess I was looking, but I thought I found it where I was trying to get comfortable with the idea of nothingness with Zen, but part of, I think that's a struggle for human beings, because I don't think we're meant for that. But yeah. Do
you think like that the nothingness, the Zen pursuit of nothingness is like a step on the path, or do you think it's a step in the wrong direction?
Well, for someone like me, that I had the typical, dysfunctional family. My parents, loved me and they did their best, but they got this little alien dropped in the middle of the family. That was me. And so, it was kind of difficult. So, so I always felt like I had to, if I couldn't be the best, then I was nothing. And so it was either the best or nothing at all. And which, of course, who can do that? Well, maybe there are some people who can do that. I'm not that smart. I'm not that talented. So no, I couldn't. So, it was part of the path. I think in a way, because I unlearned a lot of my Protestantism, and that makes it sound like I know I was, wonderful Protestant people that I still wouldn't be worthy to tie their shoes as far as like, their devotion to God and to Christ and so on, looking back. But a lot of the theology, I just had to let go. And so that took, for me, some decades of wandering in the desert for it to wash away, so that I would be open and ready for orthodoxy, I guess. So, in fact, let me see what's like that weird looking picture back there. That's a sketch painting of some of my abstract work. That is two superimposed. And this was done some years back, but now I'm going to do it with Greek. That's from the Heart Sutra. The colored squares are a glyph set that say form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And then the black triangles that are superimposed on top say that no attainment and nothing to attain. And what I was trying to do is create art that would come out of letter forms that I created, but using still the proper letters and so on in different, like boustrophédon, as we talked about last week or whatever. It depends on what order and so on. And so have an emergent art, just kind of like the sparkling on the top of a lake or something. Well, I was going for that even as a Buddhist, well, and because, and of course, here it is in Orthodoxy talks about that all of creation, declares God. And so it's like, so I can still, and it's weird because I'm not big on a lot of realist art, but even as an atheist, I loved the Orthodox icons because they're abstracted too. I wasn't that crazy about a lot. That makes it sound like, I mean, you have this fantastic realistic art. It's wonderful, but it's just not my thing. I mean, obviously somebody that's in IT, I like systems and stuff like that. And so, and I love the abstractions of, I remember even back when I was, I took some classes in art and, Lord forgive me for some of the art I made. Some of it was purposely, kind of a poke in the eye, like the Theotokos or whatever. But I loved the icons. So yeah, it's been a strange journey, but yes, I'll take it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that. Now, Andrew's church, I understand, has some interesting iconography. Would you explain, Andrew, to Mark what's so special about it there?
So it has icons by Dr. Isaac Fanous, who is the founder of the Neo-Coptic Orthodox iconographic tradition. Right?
Now, hold on. I'm writing this into a note right here. I will find all of this.
I'm going to try to bring it up and see if I can show. Is it coptikiconography.com? Would that bring me there?
Let's see.
Isaac Fanous. Here we go. Orthodox Art Journal. An interview with Isaac Fanous. Interesting.
They have an interview of Isaac Fanous on the Orthodox Arts Journal?
I just Googled Fanous Coptic art and it It came right up, so I'm going to put it into the chat here.
Oh man, I have. Oh yeah, these are some of. I saw some of these, and not in person, but I looked at them. It's like, oh, I love these. These are awesome icons.
Yep. If you see Dr. Fanous's work, you can see like icons of him trying to work out what the Neo-Coptic style would look like. Yep, that's a famous one by Stéphane René.
Okay. So this is not Dr. Fanous's work.
No, but it looks quite similar.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love how the different, you know, you have the Byzantine and tradition, and even within it seems like within the Byzantine there are multiple traditions. Then there's the Slavic, the different, some people can tell, oh, that's a Serbian icon versus whatever, and but these, these are just really amazing when I saw these.
Is there a place where we can see pictures of the icons of your church, Andrew?
Let me switch over to my computer.
I'm Googling it. Coptic Orthodox Church. Interesting.
And I love their geometry in the Coptic icons.
Yeah.
Raise some eyebrows if I started painting in the Coptic tradition or whatever. It's like, oh,
yeah,
Mark, you're not Coptic.
There's like the eyes are very distinct.
And the hands are different.
I got to let Andrew back on here. Okay, there we go. I guess you could share your screen, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so.
Close your cat videos.
That's what the whole internet's for, right? Cat videos. My cat's been surprisingly well behaved since I've been here. Normally, I've at least got Hannah in here being codependent.
So that's the one at my church. Here it's during Palm Sunday. Yeah, it's wonderful.
The screens in your church are a lot less prominent than St. Mary here in Roseville. I think they use a projector. They have like a 10-foot projector screens. And actually, the Coptic church here in Roseville, it used to be a Calvinist church called I can't remember, but it used to be. So it's a Protestant building. And then they converted it. So it's interesting because it was designed, like in Protestant style where it's really wide and short. So everybody's closer to the stage, and a very highly elevated stage. And so they convert it. They're using it for their Coptic services, and it works in its own way, though. It's interesting. Very interesting.
Yep. Yeah, we actually have this one at our church as one of the panel icons on the side.
So is it frescoed on the walls, or how are these presented?
No, it's like they've got a frame that they've bolted onto the wall, and then
Gotcha.
Now, is it painted on board?
Yeah. It's whatever gesso, I think they call it.
Yeah. And Actually, well, to be authentic, the Greek Orthodox Church here last summer, I took my first Byzantine icon class. We used egg tempera. We made our own egg, which was really interesting. And so I was wondering, in fact, that's going to happen again this summer, but I don't think I'm going to make it this summer. But do they use that in Coptic iconography?
Yep. Egg tempera is very popular in Coptic iconography. Stefan Rene is like one of the most prominent disciples of Isaac Fanus. He's really pushing for like making iconography systematic, right? So he pushes for egg tempera a lot. Yeah, this here's icon of the resurrection. You're not going to see that in a Greek church, I tell you that.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Coming right on up out of that tomb.
Uh-huh.
So I see angels. Is one of those angels holding a sword on the right, or is that his wing that's bent up?
That's his wing, yeah. Okay. Usually they bent it up to show like motion or whatever. Okay. You know.
And
these must be the myrrh-bearing women?
Yep, yep.
And are these just like the guard fainting, or what is happening?
Yes. Usually they'll put figures off to the side to, if you're like not supposed to contemplate it too hard, right? So let me see icon of crucifixion. Last Supper. So for instance, you'll see Judas here on the left. He's also painted to the side. Yeah.
And I noticed that seems to cross different Orthodox traditions, that also the side view of the face is usually not a good, if you're seeing that, that's not a good thing for that person.
So, I've heard that as well. I asked Jonathan Pajot about that. He said, kind of.
And of course, listen to Jonathan, of course, but but it does seem to carry over. I'm sure there are exceptions.
Yeah. It's pirate rule.
We do it a lot more. I think we hold to the whole inverse perspective a good bit. Like with Byzantine iconography, you'll see things like backgrounded a lot more. With Coptic iconography, it's a lot more like facing towards you.
Yeah, it seems very schematic, or like it's simple, and it's like in the point is like right in your face.
Yep.
It's a little bit more a little less busy, I'd say.
One thing that I loved about the Byzantine icons when I saw them all those years ago was the strange perspective of the backgrounds that was obviously purposely distorted, because you'd see like the frescoes of the imperial palaces and stuff that had nothing to do with religion, and they had all of that down. So this was being done intentionally, and that was really interesting to me.
Fascinating. I love when they put gilding on icons.
Oh yeah, I'm a sucker for, I don't know, maybe it's just the shiny or something, but I love it. The gilding is so great.
Yeah.
Yep. Another icon that we love to do is the flight to Egypt. I wonder why.
Yeah.
Actually, those horses are just amazing. I like the way that they are.
You skipped by the icon of the 20 martyrs. It was up at you scrolled down a little bit, and it was up there at the top. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
21 martyrs. So when this happened, I don't know. I don't remember what the year was, but I assume you're familiar with the story, Andrew. Yeah. Are you familiar with the story, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. When this happened, it was such a stark thing. Like it was so cinematically set up in the media. And it was like the ultimate media age martyrdom. And I remember after that happened, people kind of forgot about it. Many, probably in the public a couple of months later, but some people went to the village where these guys were from, and interviewed the families, and the widows, the mothers, the families, and the people were mourning, of course, but they were so proud. They were so proud because they said, for them it was 100%. They're like, I remember one of the women, it was the wife of one of the men. She had little kids. She said, we just showed the world how it works. Or they show their faith by killing us, and we show our faith by being killed by them. And I was just so emotionally struck by that, by just the whole thing, by the people in that village. It was heavy. Like that is the greatest witness that in my lifetime.
I think that's one thing that the minimalism of so much of the Protestantism I grew up with, and I'm not here to bash Protestants at all, barely had the Lord's Supper, baptism was a mere ritual, et cetera, et cetera. And when I became Orthodox, the whole idea of the great cloud of witnesses became real. And then, looking back on this, because I didn't even become a catechumen until, 2018. So that'd be about 3 years after that, I think, something like that. But it's just, and they're part of the cloud of witnesses now as we celebrate the liturgy. So, which is just, I don't know, so much more real than it ever has been. Yeah, that is just amazing.
How prominent are the 21 martyrs, Andrew, in the Coptic Church? Like, is it something that everybody is very, talks about a lot, or?
Talks about a lot. Yes, you'll hear it. Usually, like once a month, you'll hear of some martyrdom. It's ingrained in the culture.
But specifically the 21 martyrs.
I think we have a feast day for them. I'm not too sure. I think I've seen it. Let me check the Synaxarium.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, like I don't hear people talk about it. I haven't heard anybody talk about it in a long time, except for recently because the Catholic Church canonized them. So then it caused a whole bunch of controversy. But I don't hear people talk about it a lot. But for me, that was a impactful thing.
It was definitely much more important than, the Twitter dust up that occurred here recently or whatever. That I think a lot of people jumped in. It's like, yeah, but we've got 21 true martyrs here. So,
Yep. So they are in the Synaxarium. They've got a commemoration day and everything. I'm not too sure. I'd have to check, but I think we have like a relic of theirs in our reliquary.
Oh wow!
Just yeah, and yeah, everyone knows the story. So
I think for probably for I don't think that they could ever be canonized in the Eastern Orthodox Church, or at least that would be very like it would be equally strange if that did happen. but for sure, like in private veneration, like I could easily see like a relic if we were able to get a relic, we would be very proud to have a relic of one of those guys.
And I do notice, like in our commemorations during the small entrance, whatever, praying for the armed forces and the president stuff, that we now, I think it's made a lot of people much more aware of the martyrdom or possibility of martyrdom, especially with our brothers and sisters in the Middle East and North Africa and in Africa. Especially, I mean, because here it's like, wow, somebody said something bad about me because I said I went to church, or I got sued or something. And I don't want to minimize some bad things that can happen, but this is, basically baptized in their own blood. So
yeah.
yeah.
I'd like to show you guys our church. I haven't had a chance to show this yet, but oh, thanks. This is not totally complete, not totally up to date, but some guys along with myself, we maybe I could, how would I bring that up? I don't think I would have to search through my photos to find the pictures, but I know. I could go here. Incent, cross, progress, cross project, pictures. Here we go. The cross is on top of our church. We I can't find it. Anyway, the cross is on top of our church. Some guys, we got together and we made them. We had the pieces laser cut, and then we welded them in my garage and ground them down. And then we sent them over to a guy in the Bay Area who gilded them with gold leaf.
Oh, awesome.
And our church, we did Pascha in the church. This is a little bit of an out-of-date video, but music here. So there's one of the crosses going up on the crane. So this is before the roof was finished on the church, but this is our church is like way up on a very, on a very prominent hill in Roseville. Is the video playing for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so here he is installing the thing. So we made two crosses. That one there is 7 feet tall. And then we have another one that we put on the bell tower that's 4 feet tall. See if I can skip ahead to where here's the little one. There they are installing it. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's super shiny. It gleams. So Mark, if you're ever driving on Roseville Parkway, and there's our bell. They got that from that was from Greece. But yeah, we have like a very very prominent, beautiful Byzantine style church.
Definitely, and it looks like it's placed where and higher up, and it's like on the corner, so it's not tucked away somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks great.
And let's see, can I get out of here? The interior of the church. So we have this woodwork stuff has just showed up. So we have icon stands that just showed up, and the chanter stands, and the doors. So we're still working on it. But we have. Let me get back to our homepage. I can show you guys the plan for the interior. So see, there's some sample of the woodworking, the iconostasis, some of the other items we're going to have. Altar table, all going to be out of wood. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Pulpit, thrones, chatter stands, etc. Reliquary. We have one of the largest collections of relics for a parish in the United States. Let's see here. Royal jewelers. Okay, so the iconography will be all mosaic. And so this is one of the apses, the Western apse. So these are images from the life of Saint Anna. So it's Joachim and Anna. If you're familiar with their story, they were separated and they came together. The baptism in the Jordan. The presentation of the Theotokos to the temple. But here's the Pantocrator, the 12 disciples, the prophets, the 12 disciples, and then the heavenly host.
Just remarkable, beautiful.
The dome is like 40 feet across.
Oh, that's mad.
So it's going to be huge. I mean, this stuff is like, I think the iconography program is going to be like, the quote is like $10 million right now. So it's going to be decades before we get it done. But here's a rendering of it.
Going to be a lot of sore backs and stuff too. So they're going to be up there on their back, putting up the tiles and stuff.
Yeah. We're going to get a little bit of it done this summer. Some of it, like I think one of the apses will be done, but it's going to just be a long, potentially decades, till we get it done. Let's see here. Oops. And donate here. Yeah, very ambitious church construction.
Well, it's beautiful. And it's good to see and the timing is great because orthodoxy, it seems like it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's interesting. One of my very best friends, when he converted to Orthodoxy, because his Greek wife came from a big old Greek family back in Indiana, and I didn't think anything about it. I didn't bother to look up Orthodoxy. It's like, yeah, you do what you need to do to get married, dude. It's wonderful. And it's just amazing. And actually, so she came down here to the Greek Orthodox Church on Alhambra Boulevard here in Sacramento, and she swears that some of the stuff in that church came from a church that they had actually been deconstructed in Indiana. I mean, some of the windows even and stuff. I don't know if that's true, but she recognized them.
Interesting. That wouldn't be surprising to me at all. I mean, like the iconostasis we're using right now, we already have a parish that it's going to go to. It's going to go to somewhere. I think it's going to Alaska. So these things get passed around.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, it'd be too nice. What are you going to do? Throw it away or burn it? You don't. You wouldn't want to do that if you didn't have to.
Yeah.
So.
I heard a story recently of somebody who there was a church that was they took a cross down. They put a new cross up or something, and they didn't have a plan for what to do with it. And one of the guys from the construction company took it to his own property and set it up at his house or something. Some giant cross.
So, well, hopefully, I mean, if he didn't have a blessing to do that, hopefully, the Lord's merciful, and he didn't deface it or put it upside down.
No, I don't think so.
So that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many guys right now that are streaming into the church. I don't know what is that your experience as well down in Sacramento?
Well, we have a small parish, but yeah, most of the people showing up. Although we do have, I think it's this coming Sunday, we have a catechumen being received in. first female catechumen. Actually, my twin, she's like 40 years younger than me, but we both got baptized on the same day. But since then, it's all been men, mainly young men. So
we had on Lazarus Saturday, we had 12 baptisms.
Wow.
And we had in the catechism class, the people that finished the catechism class, I think there was 18. And now I believe there's 22 people in the catechism class starting this summer. So it's just like, it's a big influx. Part of it, maybe people have been thinking about it, and then we have a prominent building that could be part of it too. People are like, well, maybe maybe I'll check this one out because they see it or something like that. But also, I mean, I'm hearing the same thing all over the place. Did you see the Wall Street Journal article?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. How about you, Andrew? Are you seeing similar things?
Within the Coptic Church, I definitely not seeing 11 catechumens. I mean, heck. I think you see some trickle of catechumens, mostly as runoff from this East Orthodox explosion, right? I mean, it's certainly more catechumens than the Coptic Church has usually had. So, there's progress being made, but there's work to be done.
Yeah.
We still have more babies being baptized than catechumens, but it definitely, we've seen an uptick. So,
Interesting.
And babies are good too, of course.
Yeah, for sure. It's weird because after the pandemic, there was so much moving around. Like our parish it's not a big parish, but it was like overflowing in our current building. When we went into the pandemic and everybody went home, and then we were able to come back and we did services outside after I think we were like totally shut down for like 3 months or something, or 2 months. Except I, as the chanter, was able to go in and do services. So I did Pascha. It was just me and one other chanter and the priests. And just what a horrible time that was.
Oh yeah.
But so we came back in like a couple of months and we set up a giant like circus tent. We bought a giant tent and we set it up outside, and we just froze that winter outside, because I guess we were outside for almost a year, weren't we? I'm trying to remember.
And we were too. We have like a big covered patio.
You guys have a nice patio area out there. That's nice.
So, and we used that, and then and then you had the standing heaters to try to keep people, people like me getting ice in their beards or whatever with the wind. But
yeah. Why don't you hop on, Trey? After we started doing our services outside in the freezing cold and in the heat, the people that I saw during that time were obviously people that I knew. They're the close people, the people that are going to show up despite whatever. And then when everything started to return to normal, there were so many people that had left. Like there were numerous people that left. They're like, I'm out of California. Forget this. I'm done. And they just left. And these were like tight people in the community. And then there were numerous people that when things started to open up again, that started to show up that I didn't know. And being at where I am in my life, like with little kids, I'm not as social as I had been in the past. So, we don't like invite people over for lunch or whatever, it's just hard to do that with kids, So we never really got to got to meet people. Well, I'm meeting people, but it's like their new people are shifting and moving around and coming in faster than I can meet them all. And so I feel like I don't know half the people in our church now. It's really weird. You know, there's just so much shifting around happening.
So how are the whatever non-converts taking it today?
Our church is mostly converts. It kind of has been that way for a long time. So, and at the very least, our parish is very, very welcoming. I would say it's like a radical parish almost, in the sense that it's just, at least in the Greek Archdiocese, it's like kind of the tip of the spear in terms of, or has been kind of viewed that way as tip of the spear in terms of moving a little bit beyond the ethnic identification. As long as I've been there, it's been that way. Hang on a second, I'm gonna close my door. Kids are watching cartoons. It's been like when I first started going to that parish, it was in a strip mall, you know, typical Orthodox mission in a strip mall. And there, everybody was pretty much was Greek, but the people had decided we're not going to do services in Greek. So these are Greek people that decided that. And the priest that established it, called Dimitri, of blessed memory, he was supportive of that vision. And then the first priest, Father Cosma, as well, and now Father Christopher. And Father Christopher is like, you know, yeah, just that's totally him. So when I first started going to the church, there was like a little bit of Greek in the liturgy, and today it's like a very, very little, you know, like basically when things are repeated, we'll do it in Greek. But other than that, we do everything in English. It's been like that for a long time. So very much not an intimidating place for converts, people showing up. The way we know is, you know, we do Orthros on Sundays, we do Matin service on Sunday morning, and we know, I immediately know somebody's new if they show up at 8 o'clock. And you know, and I've never seen them before. It's like I know exactly what's going on. But I guess that doesn't work for you guys, Mark, right? You do the matins in the evening before, right?
Yes, but you can still tell usually the, you know, people coming in if they're new or whatever, and so I'm part of the grayback tribe there, you know, at Elevation. So we kind of keep an eye out too, you know, and also try to steer people there. We have some college students that have come in to make sure that, like, during coffee hour, that number one, you know, Mark, remember their name, you know, because I'm horrible with names, so that, you know, next week, God willing, I remember their name and welcome them in, but also make sure to get them with people that are more relatable than, you know, an eccentric old man, you know, or whatever with a beard that, you know, already, you know, been there, done that, and got the t-shirt and would bore them to tears. So
I know, I feel like I'm kind of a lot of people showing up are young guys, and like it's getting the point where it's like harder to relate to, you know, the new guys, the young guys. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm just starting to feel a little bit old, you know.
You know, but there is you know, when you get there, I just not too long ago turned Medicare age, so who knew that, you know, once you do, it's like this magic thing. Oh, I want you to have this test and this test and this test just because, and thank God, everything, I'm healthy. But there's also kind of a freedom in it, you know, because I'm, you know, not worried about dating or any of that or whatever. And, you know, I can wear really ugly, comfortable shoes because they're comfortable. You know, I don't have to worry. I used to be kind of a clothes horse or whatever. I was a computer contractor and stuff. You have to justify what they're charging for you or whatever. And then, and now it's kind of like, obviously I don't care. It's, you know, if it's comfortable, it's good. If it's not, well, maybe not. I already told my older friends, it's like, okay, if the ones that aren't in the church, but it's like, if you get married at your age again, just, you realize I don't have a suit anymore and I'm not buying one for it. Okay, just so that you know. So if you see me in a black turtleneck or something, that's what you're getting because you're my friend. But
Gotcha. So Andrew, did you meet Grim?
Afraid not. No, I was only at Chino for one day. So.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I really wanted to go. It was like I was seriously considering it, and then we found termites, and I've been
that's not good news ever.
No, so I've ripped apart our bathroom down to the studs. Then I ripped out the studs.
Yeah,
and we're just building it up very slowly. But it's like that's my life right now. I was like, I cannot get away. But I really wanted to go. Like yeah.
It looked like a really good time from the few, you know, shots that I saw, social media pictures and stuff like, oh, look, I saw so-and-so or whatever.
Yeah. Grim was like the one that seemed to be doing the most play-by-play updates. I don't know. Have you do you know who I'm talking about? Grim, Mark?
I have heard the name, but no.
Okay. All right. It's
Is this
deep cuts.
I'm out of it now. It's another nice thing. I don't have to be up on everything anymore.
No. I mean, this is deep cuts within a very, very, very small group of people. So I wasn't sure if you dove
Do
into
they have a YouTube channel or?
Yeah. I can share some stuff with you. But yeah, just one of the guys that participates. So, all right. Well, I better get going, guys. I got to get the kids in the bath.
I suppose it's time for me to get the cats dinner and then get me dinner. It's good.
Well, thanks for joining, Mark.
Tomorrow's food closet. So it's been great hanging out with you guys, though.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, don't sign off, okay? I'm gonna, after I end the broadcast, I just want to ask you something real quick.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks. Have a good one, y'all.
Congratulations. Thanks for the info on the icons. Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.